you can interrupt maybe over chat box, or otherwise also I'll pause in between different a few modules that I have. And in case I am not able to get to the details, I would refer to our work papers, and you can go through them, because many of the finer details I may not be recollecting in the process, because I'll try to give the conceptual aspects of the system, and we'll proceed accordingly. So Kuntal, I think I need to have the access permission for uploading. Let me see if I have already. Okay, I have. Good.
You have.
Yeah, I think good. So this is here, and I'll also
visible.
Yeah, it's so I'll close my video as such here, and I'll also enlarge it. Control L. So, so good morning, everyone. And as I was discussing with Kuntal, in fact, my research is more of communication systems, where I primarily deal with upper layers, and most cases I deal with cross-layer optimization. That includes physical layer also, but whenever it requires, we come down to physical layer or even application layer, and then many of the works are MAC layer motivated, and so on, and link layer, and so on. So not much of protocol, but protocol performance analysis and so on. So here also I am going to present our recent work on millimeter wave communication, particularly this multi-user millimeter wave communication, and while try to give a systems perspective, and move on. So these works are with some of my research students, Nancy, who is currently a senior PhD student, Suraj, who graduated recently, and Siddharth, graduated with MS a couple of years ago. He's doing PhD somewhere in US, in Austin. So I'll give an overview of these millimeter wave introductions. So some of the motivations and challenges, and then we have a few modules, in fact 3 modules of this presentation, and we have this beamwidth optimization and corresponding analog beamforming, and so where is that? Yeah. So and also this is extended further to hybrid beamforming, and we will also highlight what we mean, or rather what aspect of hybrid beamforming you are attacking, and how it is different from the conventional hybrid beamforming that we are aware of. Then we'll also get to medium access control aspect of these our proposal, and we figured out that these what 3GPP has needs to be modified to improve the system performance. So we have some thoughts and propositions over here we'll mention. Then I'll also briefly introduce some work on UAV aided communication, one basic aspect actually, but then I'll try to motivate what all UAV aided communication and UAV aided communication and multi-user communication, this combination, and these all these things I'll briefly introduce, and finally I'll conclude and this discussion. So millimeter wave, as we are aware that as we are moving, currently we are in 4G and we are moving to 5G in terms of implementation. Currently it is already deeply being researched. So one of the key aspects is that although millimeter wave or 5G encompasses sub 6 gigahertz as well as in the millimeter wave above 6 gigahertz, sub 6 gigahertz, it is like to kind of do a smooth transition, but the major benefit of this thing is taken when we are able to transition from into the millimeter wave band, for example, 23 gigahertz, 28 gigahertz, and up to 60 gigahertz. So as the wavelength is small, this antenna size is correspondingly small. Antenna element spacings are also small. As a result, large number of antenna elements can be placed, and that leads to our several features will come subsequently. So large antenna area over a small area. So that gives us implementability actually over a compact device. Then the narrow beams can be generated, which reduces which also leads to interbeam interference reduction. In fact, that in a sense leads to the concept of this thing, your cell-free network concept, and personalized connectivity, and so on. Then also it allows to have increased spatial multiplexing. If, for example, and conventionally, if we are talking about a cellular coverage, let's say for theoretical analysis purpose, we consider the cell is covered by a omnidirectional antenna, or it could be, let's say, 3-sector or even 6-sector. Here we are talking about a much narrower beam, and as a result, the full frequency reuse can be multiplexed to a much larger extent, and as a result, the overall system capacity can be increased significantly. So the other features are broad bandwidth. So these are kind of the device. These are called antenna and the related aspects. Now, some of the system related aspects correspondingly is that so it is like, if we recall our basic communication. So if I'm operating at frequency carrier frequency FC, we consider a thumb rule. Let's say 10% of the carrier frequency is the bandwidth in typical narrowband communication. So now, if I go by that thumb rule event, now if FC moves from, let's say, hundreds of kilohertz to tens of gigahertz, we can anticipate that the bandwidth that the system would provide over that carrier frequency is going to be significantly higher, and that is going to be the basis for gigabit per second data rate support. As we are aware, we might be aware that this in 4G we are talking about up to 1 gigahertz. We normally 100, maybe 1 Mbps data rate we are talking about, whereas in 5G the targeted speed is 1 Gbps and above, up to 10 Gbps. That is achievable when we move to millimeter wave. Then channel sparsity in spatial domain, so which means that because of this is actually a drawback, and that is being exploited in this scenario. Actually, drawback is that this millimeter wave has high attenuation, which also means that these different multipath effects of multipath is not as prominent as we have in sub-6 gigahertz, where multiple multipath components can cause problem. The adjustable beam width, because we have large number of antenna array elements, we can choose to refine the beam or widen the beam as desired, because large number of antenna elements, the set of antenna elements will control this beam width. And also, if the user density is larger, we possibly would tend to have a narrower beam width to cater to same number of users, whereas we can adjust to easily to a higher bandwidth for the beam width for sparsely populated user serving them. So this leads to flexible energy coverage, energy efficiency, and beamforming. This is beamforming, rather we focus on beam steering. So beamforming aspects are understandable. When we have a large number of antenna elements, we can create narrow beam, but important aspect here is that we are emphasizing on the beam steering aspect. So high beam gain and beam steering capability can be used to the fullest extent. And MIMO at mm wave, which also leads to increase throughput. Rather, massive MIMO concept is realizable at the mm wave. So now some of the constraints is that larger beam width means higher noise power bandwidth, so which means that these high transmit power requirement to cater to that increased noise power over that wider bandwidth. And also it has high atmospheric attenuation. So the coverage range we are talking about, in if we go back to 2G, 3G, even 4G has become reduced cell size, but we used to talk about up to 20 kilometer cell size in our suburban or rural areas in old days cellular telephony. Here on the other hand, we are talking about a few hundred meters, maybe 100 meter or so, or even lesser, this coverage range. This is smaller than small cell concept that we are familiar with in 4G. Dense deployment requirement because of this, the larger attenuation and then a smaller cell size requirement in that case. And as a result, we also require frequent handover, increased complexity of the system for supporting the users uninterruptedly. Okay, so of course, some of the features I'm mentioning, I'm not going to cover all in our subsequent presentation. We'll focus on certain things, but this is a broadly an overview of what are the drawbacks and advantages. Channel propagation characteristics are different. Only so only the first order reflection is supported, basically, which means what I mean here is that the higher as the path length increases, the attenuation is significantly higher. So the more than one reflected component is considered having negligible impact on the system performance or the performance degradation. So either line of sight or non-line of sight links are considered to be available. So this is kind of different from conventional fading channel concept that we used to deal with in sub-6 gigahertz, like this Raisian channel or Rayleigh channel. So channel model is very different. So the channel modeling aspect, we have done quite some work for RF energy transfer perspective, UAV aided RF energy transfer perspective. Of course, I'm not going to present these things over here. So, and user mobility poses several challenges. Now, because we are on one end, we are talking about creating narrow beam, which also means that we have to track the users much refined way. Otherwise, it will be out of the focus, and as a result, the connectivity could be reduced, which is much less severe when we are having this much wider beam width. Okay, so the other aspect here is that, so this is from Friis formula, we can see that this receive power is a PT GT GR over 4 pi D over lambda square, and with effective aperture of transmit antenna fixed, we can back calculate these receive power in terms of this PT, effective aperture, GR, and 4 pi D square, which means that to achieve the same receive power, we can control the antenna gain, transmit antenna gain, by adjusting these parameter, the effective aperture for a given lambda G. So this is achievable by having these large number of antenna elements. Okay, so some of the other advantages, and this is where we will transition to what we want to do in this presentation subsequently, is that these further advantages of antenna gain. So these are some unique aspects. The beamforming to provide single beam with high directivity So if I use, let's say, all antenna elements to construct one beam, I can achieve significantly higher gain because of large antenna array elements. We can also achieve diversity gain, where multiple low directivity beams having redundant data streams to provide bit error rate. This is conventional, these maximal ratio combining these basic MIMO concept. Also, one can achieve multiplexing gain because of these multiple low directed the narrow beams. One can think of reusing these entire spectral resource over another direction with little or no overlap of coverage from the other beams. So these are mentioned over here. Actually, this the spatial diversity, this antenna gain, the gain due to multiple fading paths, reduced fading margin, and gain depends on the scattering environment. So coherent gain, this is like a single beam when we are constructing, and then the beam steering, interference mitigation, and the spatial multiplexing. So this SDMA feature is one thing that we wanted to exploit in our subsequent discussion in today's presentation. So now I will quickly give an overview of these different beamforming approaches. These analog beamforming, where out of these we have single RF chain, and all antenna elements are their phase the phase relationship of the antenna elements are adjusted such that there is a single narrow beam constructed. So it requires a single RF chain, and that is going to construct analog beamforming, basically one beam constructed out using these things, these antenna elements. Of course, one can choose to have analog beamforming with a wider beam width when it considers a fraction of the antenna elements. But the basic analog beamforming does not consider that. We'll see the mix subsequently. Now, on the other hand, the digital beamforming is in other extreme. So the advantage of analog beamforming is that it is a much less power hungry approach because of this processing requirement at the baseband is non-existent actually. So on the other hand, in the digital beamforming, so if I have n ns antenna elements, I need ns this number of RF chains, and correspondingly these by adjusting the phase relationship at the baseband, these beam single beam or multiple beams are constructed. So in digital beamforming, one can construct multiple beams or single beam by adjusting the phase relationship among a set of antenna elements. Then there are two hybrid beamforming structures, a fully connected structure and a partially connected structure, which is also known as Savary structure. So in the fully connected structure, again, there are NS these RF chains, but this is kind of a coming from these extension of this digital beamforming. So now a subset of these antenna elements are used for constructing a so here I have so the number of RF chains is in RF here, and my so this process is at the baseband, and this so out of these NS antenna elements, NRF beams are constructed, and then these can be operated by controlling other operated or steered by controlling the phase relationship. On the other hand, the partially connected hybrid beamforming is where we require less number of RF chains. I think there might be typos over here, and so So the difference here is shown over here. So analog beamformer in this case is dealing with all the NS antenna elements, whereas in case of partially connected structure, we have this analog beamformer is operating over these. If I have n RF chains required, so analog beamformer is operating over NS over NRF number of antenna elements for constructing the directed beams. So we tend to go to, we are going to consider first analog beamforming, and we'll go to this sub-array based structure for our further discussion that we considered, and we'll also highlight what are the challenges that we envisage in the other constructions, digital beamforming and conventional fully connected structure. So okay, so in the part 1 of this discussion, meanwhile, if there are any quick questions, maybe I can take up, or otherwise I'll move. Yeah.
Yes, Professor, there is no question.
Okay. So now, in part 1, where we are going to focus on these two schemes actually. One is how do I adjust this beam width and interplay among multiple beams for covering a set of users actually. So our
Professor, I'm sorry to interrupt. There is one question from Dr. Nilakandan.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Professor. Yeah, thank you. Just I was trying to ask when you poll for the questions, but I couldn't connect properly. Okay. So when compared to the two architectures in the last two, like fully connected architecture and the sub-connected architecture, is there any specific difference, or these two, the last two, fully connected and partially connected, like any advantage of one over the other, or these two things are arbitrary and based on the requirement and the design principles?
The fully connected architecture has more control at the baseband level, but the challenge is that this processing requirement is higher.
Okay.
And whereas in the sub-array structure, this control is little lesser, and your processing requirement also correspondingly is lesser.
Okay.
The other thing that I will highlight in a few slides from now is that we are going to exploit a fine feature in one part of our work, where how these beamforming hybrid. So basically, both are going to construct hybrid beamforming, but this fully connected structure has one inherently, when you construct the hybrid beamforming, it is proposed in the literature that you construct first subcarrier allocation and then you construct these RF beamforming. So basically, hybrid beamforming has two aspects. One is analog beamforming and RF beamforming. So the order of choosing these first assign the subcarrier and then do RF beamforming, that is the feature that this fully connected structure allows us, and that causes some problem, particularly in millimeter wave. I will pose that as we proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. Yeah, thank you.
So here so we are going to exploit this SDMA feature in most part of our work that we are going to discuss here. So the spatial multiplexing feature. Now, spatial multiplexing could be interspersed with this TDMA also. We'll see. Spectral efficiency and power consumption of hybrid beamforming is a trade-off. So in fact, as I mentioned already, that analog beamforming has much lesser power consumption, but it does not allow to construct multiple beams. and hybrid beamforming is more complex, but it also it increases the reuse, but it has its also its challenge of consumption and complexity. So in fact, I'll quickly go through these aspects. Several workshops focused on hybrid beamforming design, single user, multi-user, and we are going to focus more on multi-user aspect. And on the multi-user MIMO, or rather multi-user millimeter wave communication, the work is rather lesser. Normally in millimeter wave, because it allows to construct very narrow beam, people have tended to consider the supporting single user per beam, because it can be steered if localization can be done very refined way. Multi-user support also has been proposed in some limited literature. We are going to see that, and over narrowband and wideband frequency selective channels. And this number of users M is much larger than NRF, is normally considered in one set of work here, 8, 9, and 10, where these suboptimal SDMA schemes to maximize this multi-user diversity with user scheduled in time multiplex fashion is considered. But the one trouble is that perfect orthogonality is not always possible among the users, particularly when the users are co-located or nearly co-located. So if perfect orthogonality is assumed, that these the different antenna beams that are being constructed are not interfering with each other, but that is not the case. So I think I'll move quickly with these things. So some other set of works, our literature survey can give these details in our papers. I'll not spend time. The main focus that I would like to have here is that in wideband mm wave channels, there are high correlation among the sub channel, basically because of the flatness of the channel response, and the here we are using the subchannel and subcarrier synonymously. So subcarriers are correspondingly spaced apart narrowly, so there could be high correlation, and that leads to something called beam squinting effect, where different subcarriers. So when I assign a set of subcarriers to a user, we expect we assign a set of subcarriers which are, let's say, nearby, and we expect that these set of subcarriers are going to behave similarly. That is why we choose a set of subcarriers for that particular user. This is a subchannel, let's say. And but in reality, what happens when I have a large number of antenna elements, then these different subcarriers of these WaveDM symbol face different kind of directivity. So that is, angle of arrival over different subcarrier, although they are nearby, they face different angle of arrival. As a result, the gain that they are expected to have, which is considered in the conventional hybrid beamforming, is not achieved over the contiguous set of subcarriers. And that is one of the problems of the conventional approach of these first set of subcarrier allocation and then doing the RF beamforming, because in that assumption, it is considered that this set of subcarriers are going to behave rather gain over the subcarriers will be the same, actually, but which is not the case. So beam squinting effect is one fine aspect that we have exploited in our work. Now, so this is what we are posing over here. Existing literature on wideband mmWave using orthogonal frequency division multiple access assume a priori user subcarrier assignment before estimating the RF precoder. Okay, and that poses the problem, as I mentioned, the problem of beam squinting effect actually. Therefore, for an analog beamforming dependent sector cell model, we would like to address how these beamforming should be done. In fact, what we will see that this order of subcarrier assignment and the RF precoder assignment could be relooked to have a better performance, rather to deal with the beam squinting effect. Beam squinting effect in this case is acting as a fallout, rather negative fallout, but this can be taken advantage of if we reverse the order of precoder design or RF precoder design and the subcarrier assignment. So in the one aspect, one part of our work, we considered single beam, which is basically this analog beamforming approach. And the problem statement is that we have a cell of users to be covered, and it has certain deployment pattern or user density, which could be homogeneous, non-homogeneous, does not matter. And we divide these into number of sectors, and each sector will be covered by the single beam, and that beam will be steering across all the sectors over a certain time, let's say T, capital T. So as long as we ensure that these T is sufficiently small, and these we can possibly play with these beam width adjustment and corresponding number of sectors, and to find out for under what user density what is the optimal beam width that could be considered. The simple problem statement is that actually. So here there's some of the notations that are mentioned, that we have this theta is the half power beam width, Rk as instantaneous rate over user k, and we are considering these because each the antenna beam is beam width is theta, so number of sectors that are required to cover this entire cell is given here 360 over theta, and then total sweep time we are considering fixed, and we'll see that for that fixed cell sweep time. So this is kind of ensuring that although these users are served in time multiplexed fashion, if the T is considered fixed and sufficiently small from the user's experience perspective, they will not find out these difference of discontinuous service to individual users. And then correspondingly TS is the sector sojourn time, so meaning that how much time the beam needs to spend over the sector, and PT is the transmit power and antenna gain and so on. So if we consider the total sum rate, long-term sum rate can be achieved by using this thing RM times TS over T, and if intuitively, if we reduce theta, then number of sectors are going to be larger, and for the constant T total self sweep time, my TS sojourn time has to be reduced, and if I reduce sojourn time, then I expect my rate to reduce, overall sum rate to reduce. On the other hand, we have if we have a larger number of sectors, so for a given number of users, my users per sector is going to be less. Ks is the users per sector, and beam width share per user will be in that case higher, which basically although my TS is less, because number of users supported over the beam is less, the per user rate support is going to be higher, and correspondingly we also expect that this sum rate should be higher. So we are looking at this trade-off that by reducing S, or rather playing with the sector number of sectors, we have a possibility of finding what is the optimal number of sectors for a given user density. So that is the simple statement of problem that we considered over here actually. Okay, so this is what is presented over here, that average long run user equipment or user rate supported versus number of sectors. It clearly shows there is a convex nature that and also at very high. I think there is a disconnect here. Okay, so I think
there was a problem, but now it is working.
Yeah. So momentarily it was dropped. So basically, what we see is that total number of sectors, there is a trade-off in terms of average long-run EV rate. On the other hand, also energy efficiency wise, we see that as the number of sectors are increased, my energy efficiency is higher and higher. But now if I compare, rather this final trade-off is the average long-run EV rate versus energy efficiency. So we see that I have a trade-off to achieve actually. So what we are looking at here is that So first of all, we are addressing here a scenario where the individual beam is supporting not a single user but a set of users. And what we are looking at is that what is the number of users that optimally can be supported to achieve this trade-off of sum rate versus energy efficiency. So optimal number of sectors is not necessarily infinitely large. That is one aspect that we wanted to carry from here actually. So theta star is the optimal number of optimal beam width. It gets narrower. So I think that is all. So there is a Pareto optimal condition, and that Pareto optimality is what was the objective of this work actually. Okay, now this work was further extended. So as I alluded somewhere at the discussion of ABF, HBF, and DBF, that DBF has its own challenge. We are not even talking about it. We are looking at the combination of these analog beamforming, which is RF beamforming, and the digital beamforming. So that is the hybrid beamforming. Now what we are looking at is that now can we increase this the cellular coverage efficiency by considering multiple beams simultaneously. Now, if that is the case, how should these multiple beams be constructed, and how many such multiple beams can be constructed? Again, what is the trade-off with respect to the efficiency and performance, my energy efficiency and the rate support? So that is the motivation over here. So we expected this ABF extended from ABF to HBF, and so I think we can move here. So sometimes certain sector does not have any EV at all, and so what also we consider is that if I have multiple beams, it could be possible that some of the beams, if the user density, user deployment is not let's say homogeneous, and if my beam width is reasonably narrow, it could be possible that some beams are experiencing less number of users or encountering less number of users to be supported, and some could be more than that. And as a result, within the upper limit of time to be spent over the beam, so the other beams which are I think let us go into this diagram and it will be easier for me to explain. So let's consider that we construct 4 beams. Now, although we are showing by different colors, but these are clearly doing full frequency reuse. Now it could be possible that let's say blue colored beam is catering to less number, let's say more number of users compared to my yellow beam, and which means that and also because I have multiple beams, my challenge here is that this blue beam is going to be interfered by the presence of these other B2, B3 and B4. Okay, so if let's say B1 requires full time, that sojourn time that we define, let's say full time to be spent for catering to the users over there, and B2 and B3 might have to spend lesser time, so they can the power over those beams can be reduced or removed, and to control the interference at the B1. So and that is one aspect of these playing with these, how much time I want to. In fact, this is the statement I was having here, that sometimes certain sectors does not have any user at all. So the scheduling time over those sectors can be controlled accordingly. The other possibility also is that if I have multiple beams, which I possibly do not have much results here, but I'll allude over here. Now, is it necessary that these beams have to move or steer in a coordinated manner? So clearly here, if I have, let's say, total capital S sector or SB sector here, and I have a number of beams, let's say NB. So each beam has to cover SB over NB number of sectors only. That is fine. But is it necessary that these beams have to move or rather steer in a coordinated way? In fact, there is also a trade-off that is possible to achieve, that these beams may not require to be steered in a coordinated way. Also, the individual beam width could be also played with to achieve the performance optimality, meaning that some beams could be wider at certain time and lesser certain time, and so on. So again, this so the beam, so the steps here, as I was indicating, in the standard approach of hybrid beamforming, the first subcarrier allocation is done, and then beam steering towards the users is done by RF precoding, and then power allocation. So the baseband precoding is remaining similar, same in both cases, and but in this in the existing approach, this subcarrier allocation is done before these RF precoding, and the power allocation with the baseband precoding is done as similarly in both the cases. What we modify from here, the thought is that beam steering using the codebook to a sector using RF precoding. So first we decide that which direction we want to cater, and then in that direction for that beam we figure out what is the optimal set of subcarrier allocation for the set of users. So what could happen is that when I decide the beam steering direction first, and then look at the users rate that they can be supported, these subcarrier allocation can be done better compared to if the subcarrier allocation done ahead of time before RF precoding. Okay, so in this case now subcarrier allocation and then power allocation is done jointly at the WebDM resource allocation stage. So this is in a sense a modified hybrid beamforming approach, which accounts for these fallout that I mentioned, and also beam squinting effect. Okay, so moving further, so we have some quick results possibly. Let me see here. So so the one conclusion is intuitive here, is that there is a number of the beam width, what is the optimal beam width, that is, so average long run UV rate, let's sum rate versus concurrent number of beams. So as we see that concurrent number of beams are increased from 19 to 360, my performance is having a growth and then decay. So somewhere for very large number of beams S equal to 360, my UV rate support is quite less. And on the other hand, if my this, so there is a trade-off clearly. And likewise, this is with respect to the these R versus, let me see here. I think these are to deal with, I'm not recollecting this. This is a, okay, anyway, so this is the details you can find out from the NCC paper, and the journal version is going to come very soon. So the approach that I was suggesting with respect to beam squinting benefit that we wanted to exploit, these versus the other competitive schemes in these references 17, 18 and 19 versus multi-RF MMSE approach also has a clear disadvantage, as the number of concurrent beams are number of concurrent beams is increased. So these sum rate decreases beyond certain value of NRF because the sector cell model, these RF beams are not orthogonal, so the interference is going to dominate, and as a result this multi-RF MMSE approach does not scale at higher number of NRF schemes. So by adjusting the my stage of beamforming, we are able to benefit these squinting from the squinting effect, and that gives us some improved performance. Okay, so I'll give a small pause if there is any question quickly, else I'll move on to this aspect. Are there any questions?
There is no questions. Participants, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or you can type the questions in the chat box.
Okay, so to summarize what we have talked so far, discussed so far, is that if I have a cellular coverage, we are talking about multi-user simultaneously covering multiple users, and then we have looked into the what is the optimality with respect to pure analog beamforming, optimality in terms of what should be the optimal beam width. Then we move to the hybrid beamforming, where we are talking about multiple beams can be constructed simultaneously, and then how many optimal number of beams and their corresponding what is the optimal beam width of the individual beams, that optimization. And subsequent another aspect that we also addressed is that these beam steering could be coordinated or even uncoordinated way to achieve improved performance. Depending on this uncoordinated approach works better when the distribution of the users are non-homogeneous. Okay, so in these two aspects, we are primarily focusing on the data support activity. So now we look at this scenario where the how to do the media access coordination and the user data support, meaning that this control activity and the data activity. So these there are two possibilities in the 5G. One is that we have these what is that called N? Let me see here. So we have, I'm forgetting the terminology, but I'll explain what I mean. We have these exclusive 5G based approach where these control activity as well as these data transmission activity are all happening at the 5G, versus this is standalone and non-standalone. These are the terminology. So standalone approach, in the standalone approach. So if I have these, let's say, a set of sectors, optimal set of sectors is a question that we address, and then this each sector is there are set of number of users, and we have to first do exhaustive search about who are the users there, and then subsequently the data support is achieved. So this is actually the conventional approach is a two-step approach. So first a control scanning is done. That control scanning could be in the standalone mode. It goes is done at the millimeter wave itself, or if it is standalone non-standalone mode, then the control activity is normally done at sub-6 GHz or at lower frequency, because then the sweep can be reduced by having a wider beam width at a lower frequency. And then data support is done, because data support is where the rate achievement, the rather gigabit per second rate is required. So there this is done at the millimeter wave. So this is the hierarchical search we are talking about. So this is the non-standalone mode actually. So now the commonality here is that the control activity and data activity are considered in a sequential approach. So we are looked at that aspect, that by can this approach be modified, and there are certain finer details which I am not going to explain here, is that by doing these control activity and data activity as two sequential approach, the control over the time required for the control activity is not as much. Now, can we do better than this? So we are, because we are talking about at the non-standard, we are considering the standalone approach, that the control activity and data activity both are at a millimeter wave. So, so do we do these beam sweeping for control and so on? So there these details of these, how the search is done, and then so these are the first step is that is the search is done, and then the second step this allocation is considered. So these are the approaches that are considered here. 802.11 AD, where we have a fixed frame structure, so that the time required for this search is fixed, and single user per RF beam at a time and multi-user schedule in spatial and time domain. Initial search is hierarchical, so which means that it is non-standalone mode considered, and it has this limitation of initial access delay increases with the narrow beam at G node B. Or in this case, we call it E node B, because we are talking about non-standalone mode and not suitable for cellular communication. On the other hand, in 3GPP NR, which is what is our main contention, is that it has this flexible uplink and downlink resource allocation in a slot, fixed transmission. So this is one catch here: fixed transmission time interval, and multi-user scheduling it is keeping open, and it has this exhaustive search in which the InnodeB subsequently transmits the this thing SS blocks in all directions, and it requires again significant initial access delay. So our target here is that the initial access delay is conventionally done in a sequential manner. As a result, some access delay is wasteful time that can be optimized, and that is what we have looked into actually. So this bandwidth is underutilized and during this beam training phase actually. So, and the flexible frame structure is proposed in one recent work, which is and then it has flexible uplink downlink resource allocation in a slot, and flexible TTI is also considered. And so, but it considers single user per RF beam at a time, which does not serve the purpose of us here, because we have multi user support that we target, and dedicated opportunity for each user to send the request. So again, the TDMA scheduling results in bandwidth underutilization and assumes perfect beam alignment, which is also not the case. So what proposition that we have is that this beam training and beam data transmission phase could be considered a combined effort, that when a beam is steered in a certain direction, some fraction of time would be spent for beam training, and then remaining fraction could be spent as data transmission, and that gives us the this data transmission period can be flexibly adjusted for a given sojourn time, sector sojourn time, and that can be achieved if that is going to benefit when the user population in different sectors are going to be variable. So that is the simple MAC layer modification that we suggest, and that allows us to have more spectral efficiency by using this time resource more efficiently. Okay, so I think I'll skip through these things. So this is what I mentioned, that's the benefit of the proposed scheme, that it also ensures this fairness of the users. So again, this paper is going to be up very soon. If you are interested, that I can share. I think in a couple of weeks or so, we should be able to share these details. Okay, so these some details that I mentioned before, I'll skip through because I have already, I think, going quite slow. So we see that this total number of steps required in the conventional approach versus the proposed approach is going to be the differentiator in terms of the resource efficiency, the efficient use of resources. Okay, so number of steering directions and number of can be controlled, and the time spent could be controlled, and as a result the benefit is achieved. So again, I'm skipping through these slides, can be shared if you are interested also to look into the further. So this also there is a computation that we had where we showed that when the NRF is sufficiently high, number of these RF chains is sufficiently high, the probability of 2 or more users transmitting the same this thing random access channel preamble over this P random access channel in a single frame is negligible. So that that is one key reason for getting this approach working compared to the existing approaches. I'm skipping through. So this was about that the probability of collision with multiple users are negligible. Multiple users in different sectors is negligible. It is still for very high user density. When I consider these 5,000, these, it is still limited to number of 10⁻³ or so. Okay, so collision probability is very small. Even in the worst case scenario, an expected collision probability decreases sharply with increasing NRF. And since the probability of collision is small, no need to reserve separate physical random access resources for UVs. So that is the summary of conclusion. From here we are drawing that these separate physical random access is not useful. Instead, these multiple beams simultaneously can do their own discovery and then do this exercise of control, so the training activity and the data transmission activity. So this is further detail here. I was alluding to this aspect. There's out of this total time, this control subframe and the remaining time for the this thing data is adjustable. So this is basically that allows us to achieve this variable time frame and for the data transmission. Okay, so these captures that in the 3GPP, the total initial access delay is computed here versus initial access delay in the proposed scheme is computed here in the equation 7, and we achieve a initial access delay time saving, and that benefits using that time for the data transmission. Okay, so that is correspondingly resource utilization saving as well is captured here. Okay, so I think some this is with respect to initial access delay performance and the corresponding saving of bandwidth. So this is extending these observations from these proposed coordinated, rather combine these IAD and the data transmission, initial access and data transmission. Okay, so the three approaches, the proposed framework versus 3GPP NR and the perfect tunnel alignment, which is the one scheme which was considered for single user scenario. And as we see that in 3GPP NR, by doing these initial access differently, rather wasting time in that, so it overall rate support is lesser. So green versus yellow shows the benefit of the proposed approach, and perfect alignment is anyways not achievable, and it has this constant assumption of this interference-free approach. So so here, so this I stated already. I think I should move quickly. So proposed framework achieves better average rate as well as energy efficiency compared to 3GPP NR scheme. So again, I will move quickly to some UAV based approach that we have taken up. In fact, this if there is any quick question I could take up, otherwise we'll possibly take the questions at the end. Okay, so let's move to the end. I am not okay, all right. So now so this so the in fact sequence of this work is rather inverse. We did these millimeter wave based UAV communication work in fact before these millimeter wave based cellular communication work. So some of the learning that we had from this were actually corrected, were used in the work that I have just presented actually, but this has its own challenge that I wanted to highlight actually. So what are the interests for UAV assisted wireless communication? So if we want to set up ad hoc connectivity, so on-demand wireless connectivity, emergency communication during disasters, military communication. So this could be a way to have a UAV or aerial base station. So it could be balloon based or UAV based. UAV either act as aerial relays, or so UAV can be used for multiple purpose, of course. These multiple usages which I have not considered here. So can act as either aerial relay or can act also as an aerial base station, and air to ground channel between UAV to the base station and the ground users. And the ground user is dominated by the line of sight link. So the catch here is that our problem that we attacked to solve is that these UAV aided or aerial base station based coverage were considered purely from the aerial base station to the users coverage, but the connectivity, the backhaul connectivity constraint was not considered. So what we are needing to emphasize is that these backhaul connectivity is one key aspect to be looked into actually. So these are some of the approaches that we mentioned, that these UAV can be used for providing support to some users which are possibly shadowed, and or the UAV could be used for this covering the entire cell itself, actually, where the base station is down for some critical during some emergency events. Okay, so and on the other hand, the advantage of going with millimeter wave based UAV is that it has again the range support is one primary advantage. So unmanned aerial vehicles has the mobility is one advantage, anytime, anywhere, and then strong line of sight can provide better connectivity, and also it is low cost in the sense that it can be teared down easily. So in the sub 6 GHz, it is heavily occupied. As a result, millimeter wave is of interest. And so as I mentioned, that channel measurement and then system performance analysis, interference management, and so on have been considered, but the limited analysis exists on this UAV communication for at the millimeter wave. So this work, to summarize in this slide, and then I'll show some slides, is that what we intended is that I have a UAV-aided cellular coverage, and then this entire cell have to be configured, covered, let's say simultaneously. So how many beams I need to construct, and correspondingly what is my total the backhaul limitation is also to be factored, and that is the objective. Now these how many beams could be considered, that also leads to some other constructs actually. So we could consider these beams of this kind of sector, or it could be in this fashion also, where these only the blue part is covered, and then central void part could be covered by another set of antenna arrays actually. So because this antenna coverage, the rather ground coverage will be different in this scenario compared to the ground base station. So aerial base stations coverage versus ground base station coverage are different actually. So I think that is what. So this, I think there is not much here. So some rate is low at high altitude. So basically now the question is that what is my optimal altitude, what is my optimal transmit power, and then what is, by accounting for the side lobes, what is my performance that can be achieved, and considering the backhaul connectivity, and versus if I consider idealized scenario. So this, the altitude effect is considered over here, that as at very low altitude I have coverage is some rate is less, versus also as the altitude increases, it is also performance is going to be reduced, which is intuitive in a sense that the LOS connectivity increases, but at higher altitude the path loss also increases. So versus this is as quite intuitive. I'm not going to spend time on that. On the other hand, if I have to have a minimum rate guarantee per user, then we again, this is in a sense intuitive, that as the average rate constraint is increased, the sum rate is going to fall slowly, and beyond certain point it is not achievable actually. And then there are different schemes considered, that these optimal versus suboptimal approaches. So these are what is captured over here. As the transmit power is increased, the power transmitted to each user by these mobile base station is increased, and the interference to the other users also increased, and as a result interference tends to be tolerable up to certain limit. Okay, so I think I'll quickly close these things. There is a similar result over here also, that the number of the sum rate versus number of antenna elements, and then UAV height effect also. Okay, so this is just to show here that the use of these backhaul capacity constraint, how much performance degradation happens if this constraint is accounted for, meaning that this is more realistic versus in case one. Case one is with this capacity constraint, whereas if the capacity constraint is not considered, then the performance is much higher, which is hypothetical actually. So without backhaul constraint and no side lobe interference, what is my performance versus considering the side lobe? This is actually not linear, but this is actually getting saturated. It is not clear from here. So that is what I think. Summary of this thing is that wideband mmWave channels are better utilized by serving multiple users using WebDMA, and it's not beneficial to use narrowest beam. It was one observation that we saw in the ABF as well as the proposed HBF. And then multiple beams in millimeter wave system performs better than the existing hybrid precoder design. So that precoder design order and policy is modified. As a result, it benefits in terms of my overall performance, and beamforming is independent of the user population, and variable time frame structure offers better spectral efficiency and energy efficiency, and with sectored cell millimeter wave system beam training and the data transmission for idle and connected users can occur simultaneously. So this is the proposed approach, that these concurrent training and the data support benefits. And QoS in terms of minimum rate guarantee required by individual user has a strong impact on the overall performance of the base station, the UAV communication. Okay, okay. Now there are certain directions. Some of them we are pursuing actually. So design of variable frame structure for cell model applicable for combined EIBB and MMTC and URLC application. So variable frame structure for other considerations, because in our current study we restricted to the rate constraint and the other features of the user what is it called here? So the specific aspect of the URLLC features has not been considered. Rather, the fairness was the key aspect that was considered. To study the modification required at the user equipment because of the variable frames time structure. So that is actually we did not consider at all. So he proposed that we showed that this is beneficial, but how the UEs are going to also appreciate how much time is allocated now for data transmission. This needs to be addressed. And investigate the interplay of hardware power requirement and RF chains at these mobile aerial base station scenario. And so some other aspects that are of interest is that role of RIS, configurable intelligent surfaces, on enhancing mmWave communication performance, because these mmWave has these your line of sight is very important, and if there is any line of sight obstruction, and it could be possible that the coverage is totally missed. So these RIS is one direction that is being pursued aggressively across the research community. So UAV to UAV aerial communication and UAV to satellite communication, and also 3D coverage in 6G. Primarily of interest is LEO satellite based connectivity and UAV aided sustainable IoT network, where also we have done quite some work in the primarily from the RF energy transfer perspective. Okay, so before I conclude, just one slide I wanted to show here with respect to my broad direction. So we have been working on energy sustainability aspects, RF energy harvesting and RF energy transfer. A lot of work we have done in that direction, and primarily what we are interested in is multi-off energy transfer, energy routing, and distributed beamforming based RF energy transfer, data-driven smart IoT communication. So this is one of the major aspects that we are currently also emphasizing, is that these low energy footprint and the energy sustainability is a critical aspect. I think I need to wrap up quickly. And the edge intelligence and the smart grid IoT network from the low power perspective, and from the broadband perspective, some of the things that I presented is in this direction, that millimeter wave rural broadband access. Primarily, we're interested in this coexistence of multiple technologies. One thing that we have been pursuing is, I think, with respect to the TV white space and DVB-T2 versus ATSC3, and so URLLC and ultra high bandwidth communication. This is also another focus, and particularly from the MAC layer perspective, we have been working, and UAV aided communication and RIS assisted communication is we are currently also focusing. I think I'll close here, and if there are any questions, I can go back to the slides and explain. Possibly I've run through quite fast in some of the cases. So I think I'm done here.
Yeah, thank you. Professor Dey, such a nice talk. There are a couple of questions. Let me start with this one from Vijay Selvan. The question is, why mobility issues not considered in this work? Perhaps the question was related to your part 3.
Okay, this is a valid question. So part 3 here. So our target application here was we have a certain congregation of users, could be a cricket match or some let's say disaster recovery. So some small mobility is considered, but because we are in this aspect, we are considering all the entire cell is covered simultaneously. Okay, so number of how many number of sectors to be considered. So the user mobility, or rather inter-cell handover, these questions do not come here. Right. So this user mobility is becomes more critical when when we are talking about the let's say individual single user beamforming. Now, the other aspect of the question could be that what about the aerial mobility? So we are considering here this is like yeah, I think we are focusing on this aspect, where this is hovering base station rather. It is not that UAV is moving around or flying by and then it is doing the cell coverage.
Yes.
Okay, if there are any specific things you can explain, the questioner can explain directly. Yeah, anything.
Yes. So Vijay Selvan, if you are there, you can unmute yourself and you can ask directly. I mean, to further clarify the question, or otherwise we can move to the next question. I think you have clarified quite well. So I think So there is one question from Dr. Nilakandan from IIT Goa. Dr. Nilakandan, you can please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Kundan. So, Professor, just I have few questions about this UAV communications and the millimeter wave band. So, since in many papers I have seen for the UAV drone communications, they still consider this kind of a Rayleigh fading channel with the line of sight part. So, what applications I should substantiate in order to say that I would like to go for millimeter wave band for the UAV to maybe say direct user link, or from base station to UAV link?
So first of all, if I am considering millimeter wave and also I am considering this Rayleigh channel, I think they don't go together.
Okay.
This is not practical at all actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is the first thing. I think maybe what is the subsequent aspect. So I would not consider, if I am considering millimeter wave. In fact, my channel model is very different. In fact, for millimeter wave, there is a separate model altogether where this Rayleigh does not come into picture at all actually.
No. My question is that if I have to consider UAV communication, say from the channel model from UAV to user with the line of sight part, is it typical to consider the millimeter wave band or several? I'm not saying that in the millimeter wave band in the Rayleigh coefficients. I'm saying that they completely consider Rayleigh channel itself. So under what scenario or what applications we have to say that the communication is taking place at the millimeter wave band, not in the microwave band where we take the Rayleigh fading channels?
So first of all, I don't want to mix these Rayleigh fading and millimeter wave, because as I mentioned, because when I'm talking about millimeter wave, my first of all communication range is small, and then to benefit from millimeter wave, I have to have a narrow beam. So as a result, I will have a strong line of sight, and then this Rayleigh model is not going to work actually. So I think again, as I will not mix these two. For that, I will rather go for these. I think there are some models. You could refer to our some work on RF energy harvesting, very recent work published in Transitions on Communication. You can have a look and see what model we have considered.
Okay.
So that could actually it is actually as I mentioned, these two looks like a bad mix, that under what condition millimeter wave and Rayleigh could be feasible. I don't think I would consider that.
Okay. Now just let me slightly. So in generally from UAV to the user model, typically they consider what kind of band they generally choose. I mean, any recommendations from the 3GPP release also?
So I am not aware, first of all, from UAV to the this is being researched over all frequencies. Millimeter wave is one possibility that is being researched. So we also jumped into that. That is how I would suggest. But if I have to go for let's say 5G using UAV, I would possibly start with 3.5 gigahertz.
Okay.
Because 3.5 gigahertz is actually targeted for 5G coverage, and in India also this is being discussed to be released soon for 5G communication. So 3.5 gigahertz is the band to operate if I talk about 5G. So and at millimeter wave for India, so this is also country specific. So in India, I think we are talking about 26 gigahertz. 26 gigahertz band is where the communication, millimeter wave communication is being targeted. It is country specific. Different other countries are considering some 44, 60, and 28, and so on, 23. Yeah, I'm not actually aware exactly what 3GPP specification for this thing, but 3.5 gigahertz is one could be considered.
Okay, just one last more thing. So in case when we apply the millimeter wave band or millimeter wave channel for the UAV to the user, so can we assume that this kind of massive MIMO structure in base station, or that is not something feasible? I should make the assumption in the model.
So this assumption is being made currently because if I do not consider massive antenna structure, then my main benefit I'm not going to get that narrow beam formation and then high rate support. Our primary target is that actually, that is one aspect. So because if I am targeting 5G rate support, which is talking about gigabit per second, this can be achieved only when I have a very narrow beam focus to particular set of users or particular user. Now coming to the other aspect is that whether it is feasible. So this is a question which is being researched, that how to make this UAV more energy efficient, meaning that radiation power is very large. So there are how to increase the battery lifetime, whether the UAV itself could be having this what is called energy harvesting capability. So there are other hierarchical models being considered. Higher altitude platform UAV is going to collect energy from solar, and then it is going to do a what is that called RF energy transfer pointed to this thing to the UAV which is covering the users.
Okay.
So there are different aspects being researched, but this is currently this is not practically feasible. That much I can say. It is not practically feasible, but it is worth researching because people are coming up with more energy efficient batteries, longer life, and so on.
Okay. Just if you don't mind, just last one question. So when we think of this millimeter wave band and IRS, so when we have very focused beam from our massive MIMO architecture with a millimeter wave band, so should we have to think about incorporating IRS into that again? That is also going to serve the same purpose. So could you please say something about like where we have to think about millimeter wave and IRS kind of an architecture?
So you are talking about IRS or RIS, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so these two are going to be actually complementary because millimeter wave. So I am actually let's say a UAV or any base station is actually interested in covering certain user, and then that user cannot be reached via that pencil beam that is being formed. Now, what is the alternative? Alternative would be then I will just direct to a IRS, and IRS will be reflecting in that particular direction by controlling the reflectivity.
Okay. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yes.
Thank you, Professor. So let me go to the next question. Next question is from Puli Anand Babu. So the question is, does the performance of beam for uplink and downlink depend on multiple access and modulation techniques?
This is very much multiple. So when we are talking about cellular, so let me rephrase the question. What was the question again? Let me see.
Does the performance of beam for uplink and downlink depend on the multiple access and modulation techniques? Perhaps the performance of the beamforming in the case of uplink and downlink, whether it depends on the multiple access and modulation techniques. And that is the question, I think. Or maybe the design of the beamforming has to consider multiple access or modulation techniques being used.
So we are not actually mixing these two. So multiple access, you see, if we are looking at the way we have presented here, we are actually talking about multiple access. Now multiple access could be done by switching from one user to another user, or switching from one set of users to another set of user. And that is where we were doing this interplay actually. So how many users should be connected simultaneously, and then how much time I should spend, and what is the, I was mentioning also initial access delay. In fact, in the 3GPP currently, the way it has proposed this initial access part and the data transmission part, we thought that it can be improved. So that is actually part of the multiple access. So because I have set of users, and these set of users in every scan, every frame duration, it could be different. So it is proposed that it is going to scan the entire cell. It could be over the same band or over a different band, out of band in the case of NSA or NSA mode, and then come to actually data support. So that is actually part of the multiple access. Now we found that is actually going to be time wasteful, and it can be improved by the proposition that we gave actually, by variable time frame allocation, and also combined initial access and data transmission. So these are dependent. And with respect to the modulation, this is intuitively modulation is also going to be factor for uplink and downlink. But we have not delved into the modulations for the millimeter wave communication, so I cannot answer appropriately on that actually. But of course, it is going to be affected.
Yes, thank you, Professor. The next question is from Vijay Selvan again. So the question is beamforming or isotropic, which one gives more interference in terms of intercell interference? Beamforming or isotropic, which one gives more interference in terms of intercell interference?
Yeah, it's a good question from the classical perspective. So first of all, this question is somewhat answered when I talk about multiple beams. So hybrid beamforming, when we talked about, we are actually talking about multiple beams. So one extreme of multiple beams could be that entire cell is covered by the single beam. Now, if I have beamforming, naturally my intercell interferences can be controlled much better. Right. Intercell interference can be controlled much better if I have the beamforming capability, because I can steer, I can control the power over different subcarriers also. And that is how it is. If you extend this cooperative multi-point thought in this direction, that is how it is. So when a set of subcarriers are used from one cell, and same set of subcarriers cannot be used from the other cell, and then you can deal with the intercell interference. Right?
Yes. Thank you, Professor. There are two more questions. One from Dr. Anup Kumar Misra. The question is how beamforming and maximal ratio transmission are different?
Good question. So if we go back, so first of all, let us go back to our slide. So if we recall our, I'll go to that three differentiators that we talked about over here. So beamforming is a broad topic. Now it is under the umbrella of beamforming. You have the hybrid beamforming capability, digital beamforming capability, analog beamforming capability. So when I am talking about this, your maximal ratio transmission can be said to be closest to analog beamforming. Okay, so I'm creating one beam, and then I am doing this beamforming by changing the phase relationship. So let me recollect here. So So this can be of course done at the baseband maximal ratio transmission by doing the phase relationship, adjusting the phase relationship. But beamforming is a broader topic, broader because the maximal ratio transmission is at the baseband, whereas beamforming can be at the baseband as well as at the RF. That is how I will differentiate. Okay, so when we talk about MRT, we talk about baseband beamforming or rather digital beamforming. I think that is how I'd like to differentiate. Whereas I have hybrid beamforming where I have RF stage as well as the baseband stage at the baseband precoding stage, and that gives us more control of how many beams I can construct, and different beams can have different power and so on. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. There is one question from Suvam. The question is, what are the key challenges in UAV communication using millimeter wave?
So I wanted to mention many things, but out of these things. So there are several aspects. So one thing is that when I am talking about UAV to UAV aerial communication, there are a tremendous challenge of if I have to ensure high data rate support, I have to go for millimeter wave narrow beam. But when I have this narrow beam, then these two UAV flying coordination has to be perfect. Otherwise, the beam misalignment could cause the data rate degradation significantly. Same question happens when we are talking about UAV to ground communication even actually. Because if the users in reality users are mobile, UAV itself is also mobile. So tracking the users simultaneously, set of users, and then providing the rate support is more challenging. If I had a single beam, like entire spot is covered by the single this thing, that is not possible using UAV and satellite. UAV and millimeter wave because of the very high loss. As a result, I have to go to narrow beam, and when I go to narrow beam, I cannot cover all the users at the same time. So user tracking is a critical aspect. Similarly, if I have aerial coordination, also going to be a critical aspect. And the other aspect is of course the energy consumption, as one of you have pointed out. The energy of the UAV is a critical factor. That is why it is again not very popular yet actually. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Professor. There is one more question from Vijay Selvan. The question is, shall we use side lobe for any useful application like energy harvesting?
So this is my what is that called, favorite question actually, in a sense. Actually, physical layer community do not actually account for the challenge of energy harvesting. So as a result, there are tons of papers. Physical layer theory people are publishing that we will be using some fraction of power for energy harvesting, some time for energy harvesting, and the time switching and power splitting, etc. But forget about the side lobe for energy harvesting. So what happens is that your energy harvesting efficiency and data communication efficiency are very, very different. So think of when my main lobe is having the main power. So if the main lobe is used for my energy data communication and data communication efficiency, I would like to also ask this audience, including Dr. Selvan, that we know typically what is the data reception efficiency sensitivity of the receiver. It can be as low as -100 dBm, right? Right. Whereas my energy reception sensitivity is currently in the current state of the art is -20, and in fact it still doesn't work actually. It is -10 is comfortable, -20 is in lab environment it is possible, but it is otherwise not. It is actually time is so large for charging it's not feasible actually. So which means that if my main lobe is giving me -60 dBm power at certain distance, Side lobe is going to give much lesser than that actually, right? Minus 60 dBm and less than that could be minus 70, minus 80. So, and whereas my energy harvesting sensitivity is minus 20. So no way that side lobe can be used for energy harvesting. So yeah, I think this once you account for the energy harvesting sensitivity and energy harvesting efficiency, you will be able to answer the question by yourself that most of the propositions by physical layer community do not work actually. We have been doing experiments on that, and that's why this is a favorite question for me actually, that this what is workable, what is not. So side lobe for energy harvesting, I don't think it is feasible at all. The moment you look at the energy that it gives you, power is on the order of less than what main lobe could give. So it is not possible. I'd like to say that way.
Yes, thank you, Professor. One participant has raised hand, Aman Narsaya. Yes, please go ahead with your question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Just my question is a basic question related to UAV to satellite communication. When we are designing the uplink and downlink links in a UAV to satellite communication, Bread's most of the times uplink frequency is much higher than the downlink frequency. So can you shed some light on this, sir? Why uplink frequency is higher than downlink frequencies in UAV to satellite communication?
So this is I cannot fully answer, but I'll give you from my broad idea. So first of all, to my knowledge, it is not that uplink frequency is much higher than the downlink, but it is a band actually. For example, 4 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, it's a pair. 12 gigahertz, I think 14 gigahertz, it's another pair. And so on. So uplink is 6 gigahertz, downlink is 4 gigahertz, and so on. Yeah, so they are there nearby. Now the separation is why the separation, that is understood, right? Because you want to have these this thing. Basically, your over the same band you cannot transmit because of these your wireless reception constraint, half duplex reception capability. Now, in fact, what I cannot answer right now is that why uplink is chosen. In fact, I am not aware also whether uplink is higher frequency and why it is so. So that answer I do not have. But this is a valid question actually. But it is not very different actually. Uplink and downlink are actually nearby bands, and that is what. Hopefully. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, one more the fundamental question. The UAV, actually, this unmanned aerial vehicle. What are the different situations where we use general base station and where do we use this UAV, sir? In mobile communication or cellular mobile.
So you see, this is intuitively we can answer this way, that wherever I see that it is rather. So deploying a ground base station has its own resources required. It's some time consuming affair actually. So if I have to develop a quick connectivity like disaster recovery scenario, and suddenly I have to augment my capacity of the existing ground base station, or ground base station has been damaged for some reason. So in such cases, one can quickly deploy a UAV. Which can have all the base stations functionality, and then it will be doing these radiation. So basically deployment, your downtime of the network is going to be much lesser in such scenario. That is one. And but other application that is being targeted is the military application, where it can consider, you can create your ad hoc network actually. So 3-dimensional ad hoc network you construct and then you remove. So let's say a battalion is moving and then they have to be given a proper coverage, wireless coverage. So a UAV could be acting as the mobile base station, and then it will be teared down as the battalion's activity is over. So to summarize, in the strategic applications, as well as in the emergency applications, these UAV aided communication is going to be very important. And the UAV and your LEO satellite combination is considered to be actually 5G network, 5G and 6G, because these LEO satellite distance is reasonably smaller compared to geo satellite distance, on the order of 200 to 700 kilometer only, and it is supposed to provide on the order of 10 millisecond delay, which is the borderline for the 5G communication delay requirement. So for strategic application, this is one aspect that is being considered as a feasible approach actually. Right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, all right.